Today is Murder Sunday.
Oh, Murder Sunday.
Wow. I'm sorry to be here.
That'll get them. That'll keep them praying. That's how we get them praying. We threaten them. You don't pray, you don't make it out of this service alive.
We're all a little guilty of that, so I guess it works.
Yeah. It works. If it works, hey.
All right, we're taking off. This is Thursday Sunday Report.
Thursday,
the
Thursday Sunday Report.
Every Sunday we do a Thursday report for Sunday.
It's prophetic.
So you're watching Sunday's report here on the Bald Noggins, keeping it real. I would say keeping it live, but
that would be a lie.
It's live right now. But anyways, we're bringing back our special guest, Pastor John, and we still have our internet pastor, Mike, who's still with us.
We could forget about that one. I mean,
it's already in the description below. So go ahead.
If I can't make it, I can just rely on Mike to do it.
That's right, Mike. You're filling. Mike's your filling.
I'll be the backup. I'll be the second string.
Yes, and today we have a pretty fascinating story about somebody who visited the island that John was pastor on, Dutch Harbor, Alaska, and quite an intriguing story. And I'm going to just let John just dive right into it.
All right. When you open your door to anyone, that's exactly what you get.
Anyone.
And I got a fellow who I'm not sure how he ended. Well, I kind of know. There's a Proverbs chapter 28, verse 17 says, a person who is a murderer will be a refugee for life. Let no one support him.
Oh,
isn't that interesting? It says if someone's a killer, they're going to spend their whole life running, escaping, and don't have anything to do with them. Well, I broke that scripture.
I was going to say,
you murdered someone?
Numerous times. I mean, I have violated the scripture more than I can say.
You're basically an expert on both sides of
Yes, I am. And that's helpful.
Well, in Ecclesiastes, it says, don't be overly righteous, but don't be overly wicked. Hold on to one end, don't let go of the other. And John has taken that scripture to heart and held on to it, brother.
Yeah. Anyway, so this one fella showed up who was sent to me from Roger Rowland. You guys Chris would know Roger. I think it was the Contentment was his boat, and this guy was a crew member on his boat. I'm not sure where he picked him up. Probably up in Kenai. He kind of got around it.
Probably picked him up out of that CVS out on that island out in the.
He was waiting for CVS to open and was not having much success. Anyway, the guy showed up and he was fairly intimidating looking. When their face is pretty much covered in tattoos, they've been around.
Yeah.
And so took him in, obviously gave him the paradigm that we live in, and he was appreciative. And after he'd been with us, been involved for about a week or so, and people, when they realize that it's a safe environment, like we don't have any agenda, we're just here to do everything we can to get the person to the next step, whatever that is in their life. We want to successfully, safely move them into whatever it is that God may have for them or whatever. And so at some point he said, I murdered a few people. He says, I went to jail for it. And I guess he was in prison 15 years, I think maybe Texas, I'm not sure. And I said, really? I said, what happened? He said, well, he was at this person's house, and I'm not sure what the issue was, but they got in an argument. The older fellow went upstairs and he was coming down what seemed to be threatening, possibly a gun. He said, so I shot him, and he died. And a couple of days later, he went back, and the guy's son or nephew was there, and they obviously had room for another serious argument. And I don't know if the other guy had a gun, but he said, I just shot him and killed him too. Within a couple of days, he'd killed a couple of people. But when he said it, he didn't sound remorseful. It's sort of like, I think after being in prison for 15 years, you get harder or softer. It seemed like he got harder.
Yeah.
Where it was sort of like a little badge of honor. And
Right.
so watch out, I've killed a couple of guys, and that was no big deal kind of a thing. And when he closed his eyes, he had eyes tattooed on his eyelids. So he closed.
So he never slept.
You didn't know if one eye was open or they were both open, or maybe both were closed. Anyway, they weren't like very, really, really good eyes, but they were enough. If the room was a little dim, you wouldn't know he was.
Beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah. So anyway, we're working with him, and I had told him that, we were meeting at the church. It was a duplex where I was staying, and half the duplex downstairs we used for stranded. And I was in the process of dealing with the elbow room bar where we had converted it and made some progress.
And just, I'm just going to interject right here for those maybe watching the show for the first time. John had gotten ownership of the most dangerous bar in North America, the Elbow Room, which is located in Dutch Harbor, Alaska. And after a while, several months to years, he's converted it into like a mission house, a place where they draw in funds, donations to help the stranded on the island.
And
so
you go to the New York Times article.
And right, the New York Times wrote an article, "Stranded in Dutch." It's down in the description below. You can look at it. Very interesting article. A great ministry. So I always like to say John is the owner of the most dangerous bar in North America. John doesn't like that, but
never ordered one drink and regrets it.
There's probably time you need a drink, especially talking to the guy that's a murderer. I can use a drink right about now.
So we were in the process, and we were doing everything volunteers. We had to gut the place and remodel it, all doing volunteer work. So whenever I had stranded people who the first obligation was they would be out looking for a job. But if they've done everything they could do at the time and they had a little extra time, I'd say no obligation, but you're welcome to come on over to the Elbow Room Bar, which was now we called it a nonprofit Alexandria house. You come over and help. And he said, oh yeah, during a few of the hurricanes, we got some government contracts, and I did lots of sheetrock work on lots of houses, I said, man, that's fantastic. Right now, we're at the place where we need to do a bunch of sheetrock in the upstairs. And he said, oh, yeah, we would do it so fast. We get so much done. I'm thinking, hey, I can't pay you, but if you're willing to volunteer, it'd be great. He said, sure. So I was busy for a day or two, had to do some other things. And so I got there. He had been doing it for maybe a day and a half. Well, it turned out he wasn't doing it. He had gotten a couple of other stranded guys to do it, and it was horrible.
I went to check. I guess John asked me to go take a look. I was law enforcement on the island, and I went in there. I was like, man, what a mess. It looked better before when there was no sheetrock on it. Like they slapped it up there, and it was.
I said, what's going on? And he wasn't doing it. He had actually gotten a couple other guys that didn't know anything. They were doing it. He was a conniving guy, and he said, "Oh, don't worry. When it's taped, all that'll be covered." Just tape it.
When we put the sheets and the blankets up and everything, it looked fine.
Little paint.
So there was some Hispanic guys on the island, the Matamoros brothers, that were really good at doing carpentry work. And I went to them and I told them, okay, hold off. They had taken the green sheet rock, which is for the bathrooms, and put it in the living room and in the hall. Anyway, so the Matamoros brothers came over a few days later, and they looked at it. They said, if you want us, we're going to charge you, and we got to tear all this down. And I'm just thinking, oh, great. So anyway, then Mark Buchholz came along about within the month, and he had been fired from a job on a boat, but they gave him 8 months severance pay. And so he had nothing to do. And I'd seen his work. He'd redone an office by the Safeway, really nice job. And he said, I've got nothing to do. Let me work on it. And I just grabbed him and said, yeah. And so for like 6 months, that's every day. And we ended up with a fantastic looking place. So moving back to, I can't remember the guy's name I'm talking about just as well. He never confessed his sins to me, so I can talk all about him I want. Anyway,
the pastor-client privilege has been rescinded or whatever.
So he volunteered it, and I tell you, he wasn't repenting, unfortunately. So he got he swindled poor Sonny Nguyen out of a bunch of money. But anyway, he left the island, and I said, oh, you're going? He says, yeah. He says, my brother's in Texas, and he works at this lumber yard, and we can go in at night, get all the lumber we want, start building houses.
Oh my gosh.
I said, man, you are in trouble. You're a troublemaker. So anyway.
Well, you should, and John, you should have just told them, as long as you don't do the sheetrock, you'll probably be okay.
Well, he was convinced he was a good sheetrocker. Anyway. So he was gone for about a year, wasn't it, Chris? I don't know. He was gone for a while.
Yeah.
And he showed up, and he came to the house with this girl and he says, you got to talk to we're having some serious issues. And they had a child by then.
Yeah.
I think
it's like a 6-year-old girl, or maybe
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think that seemed like it was just a year or two. I don't know.
Maybe it was younger. Yeah.
Younger. Anyway, they said we were staying over at the Grand Illusion, and there's a demonic activity. The demon was trying to pull the kid under the bed, and trying to pull the kid out of the bed. And they said it was all this paranormal activity. And I said, well, I'm just from observing you. I said, seems like you're making all kinds of room for all kinds of demonic activity. But I'd be happy to pray because on the island, I did have to deal with actual demons and people that were possessed. On numerous cases, we had those issues on the island. I don't know what it is about Dutch Harbor, but in the native culture and whatever. And so anyway, I said, yeah, I can deal with it. If it is demonic, that would be easy to deal with. If it's mental or something else, that's out of my purview. So anyway, so I was waiting. Anyway, I'll let Chris turn because you kind of.
Well, actually, yes, that night or the next morning, we got a call from the hotel, and they said someone's complaining about noise from a room, and they believe that maybe somebody had been murdered. Like, maybe I'll go check it out.
Yeah.
I'll get a cup of coffee. I'll be right over. So obviously, I rushed over there. I skipped the coffee, and I knew who was in the room. They told me, or I was like, oh, I know, probably is murder. So anyways, I went to the door. At first, I knocked on the complainant's door, and he's like, yeah, I was up all night. It was like they were screaming, and he said there was so much noise, and he thought that maybe somebody got killed in there. It was bad. So I'm like, okay. So then I knocked on this guy's door, the murderer's door, and he answers it, and he's all friendly. He's very good at being your buddy and just kind of very manipulative type person, I guess. Yeah.
That's funny.
And so he's like, oh, no, everything's fine here. Come on in. I looked around. There's no blood. There's no bodies. I mean, somebody's been living in the room, obviously. He's like, no, that guy, he's a jerk. He got mad because I didn't hold the elevator, something like that. He's just trying to get me thrown out of here. It was all the other guy's fault, wasn't it? And he said, yeah, maybe the TV was a little loud, but that was about it. He didn't tell me about any demons or anything like that.
Yeah,
I guess. So anyways,
so
like nothing I could do.
Himself?
No, he had the family was there. She's on the bed with the baby, the little kid, whatever baby.
She was alive.
And they were both alive. He was alive. no bodies, nothing that looked like there had been a crime scene.
Wow.
So, anyways,
yeah.
that was, but obviously I was concerned because I knew the guy. I thought maybe it is. So now we know it was demons, So on this
Well-
show, finally we figured it out.
It was
Hey, maybe you can figure
paranormal.
out. I know. I was thinking, John, maybe you could figure out what's going on with the drones in New Jersey because no one believes that it's the government.
Well, the government said it was them. But anyway.
Yeah, they said, but nobody believes them.
Well, we know. Well, anyway.
So what? So
It
John,
could be-
what do you
could
think
be
it is?
anything. It could be anything.
Well, it's not. It's drones.
Well, it is.
No,
It
it's
is
drones.
demons. It's the government. The government's full of demons, and they've sent that drones up to annoy
If
us.
the government's involved, there's demons involved.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
So what I want to do, we have this guy, this murderer, and I just wanted to kind of put it in the context of, everybody is born with a certain identity that God has placed in our life. Each one of us has an identity in Christ, and we look at this guy, and he's saying he's a murderer. So, and in a way, he's almost operating out of that identity. But
Yes.
that identity is what, John?
Well, whatever we do, it comes from who we think we are.
Right.
I mean, my view of myself informs how I act and what I do. It may be a false image. It usually is, because as we're growing up, this is something that if people could tune into Jamie Winship. I think he's got I don't know, you have to find his identity website, but he does a fantastic job just saying that everything comes back to identity. The whole world is identified by identity, even the structure of our cells and our body, to the animal, to the world. Everything comes down to trying to identify. All the organization and assembling of anything, you have to identify what it is to know how everything fits. And he goes and he does a wonderful job saying, we really like to take pride in being self-made, or, I'm my own person, I'm my own. And he says that's really destructive, because really the truth is you're always at your best when you're connected to other people and you're not thinking of yourself, you're thinking of the others. But he said most of our identities come from when we're kids. We start out in a good place because our identity is put in us when we're created in our mother's womb. There's an identity that's there. And if you think back on your life and you go, when I was a kid, what was a moment where I just felt really fulfilled, really joyful? What was going on in my life when I could remember being involved in something or a situation where I felt fulfilled and full of joy? He says that is, if you can identify that, and may take some time to think about, he says, you're connecting to your true self. But what happens is, like, you have kids, they like to put on plays, and even when they're little kids, they're very outgoing and they'll just do almost anything because they haven't been developed any fears from people. But let's say they do a little play, they get a little older person says, you're a lousy actor, or you can't talk, or you're not very smart. All of a sudden, those things begin to cloud our true identity, to where we get in junior high and high school, and the true self is now covered with all these, if we were to name ourselves, what are all the names of yourself that hurt you, or what are all the ways people see you that hurt you, or whatever? That's our false self. And this guy who's a murderer, he obviously was dealt a lot of stuff to where the image of himself was, I'm a rough, tough, ugly, mean guy, and I can, I'll do what I got to do to survive. And he's acting out of that. And even when he was with me, when I talked to him about his past, you could tell that he was still acting from that place of hatred for others and whatever. And that was his false identity. But that's how he saw himself. So
Yeah.
most people are acting that. It's fear. We feel guilty about stuff. We're ashamed of stuff, and fear comes in, and we get a view of ourselves that is really unfortunate. And it's
Right.
really
And it's interesting because I read his book, Living Fearless. And he's like, whenever you have this false identity and then you go to God in prayer, you're not going to him in honesty. You're going to him present it with a mask on or hide this. So the relationship, if you're in this false identity, is corrupted. I mean, you can't have a good relationship because you're living in a lie, and he knows you're living in a lie, but until we realize that lie and tear down these walls and masks, I mean, that relationship is always going to be difficult, and then you just got to work through it. And obviously it's not a one-day fix. It's pushing through, pressing on, and just being honest with yourself and being honest with God. Really, is that a good starting point? Identify what you're afraid of and realize it and just put it at God's feet. Hey, I'm afraid of all these things. Kind of interesting because he talks about confession, and confession's not about I'm sorry.
Right.
It's more of,
remember Tim. I remember
afraid.
Mom and Dad would get so mad at Tim, our older brother, because he was getting in trouble, and they would approach him and he would say, I'm sorry. And I remember Mom going, I'm tired of you hearing you're sorry.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't solve anything.
Yes, she was on to something.
Yeah, she was. She was probably started this. Yeah.
She was on.
Yeah. So it's not about being sorry. We're all sorry. It's about being honest with yourself and identifying what, and it's not so much moral failings, but it's what causing the moral. Why do I drink too much? Why do I lie so much? Why do I cheat on my wife? So it's not, those are like moral failings. So we have to dig deeper. Why are we doing these? And there's something more. Guilt, shame, and fear are basically the three that drive people to sin. So so it's an interesting book. But what's more interesting is watching this show and not reading that book.
This is better than the
so much.
There's he
look at
you
your
can do it in 3 steps. You can find your true identity in 3 simple steps. The first step is you just write down or you think about how people have seen you in your life or how you see yourself that hurts you. What are the images of yourself that you feel bad about, that you think other people's may feel, or you're afraid that they may see you that way, that you're protecting? You write those down and then you give them to God. These are all the negative images of yourself and identifying factors of yourself that you just have accepted that you're believing are true, but they're lies. But you believe it, so you act out of them because that's how you believe. The second step is you just give it to God. You say, God, or just take these. I realize that these are lies that I've believed. You have something else for me, so I give them to you. And then after you've cleaned out, you've removed those in a sense that you've given them out, now you have room to actually hear from God your true identity. And you simply ask God, Lord, how do you see me? And you just wait. And usually the very first thing that comes to your mind that you kind of want to discard, he says it's probably really close or right on, write it down, because our rational mind will immediately try to tear down what God says to us because we're so used to believing the lies that when someone says something really good about us or amazing, it's hard, we just have a hard time with it. So that is the process that he puts people through. And when they identify, when they hear the beautiful thing, the mission that God sees them, now they're not living in that. And that's a lifelong, when God speaks to you, it's sort of like those of you who have heard of, been involved in the Bible with Gideon. Gideon is a coward. He's hiding because the Midianites have overtaken the land, and his whole thing is living in fear and cowardice, hiding from the Midianites. An angel appears to Gideon, and he says, Gideon, you mighty man of valor. And Gideon goes, no, you got the wrong guy. I'm the least tribe. I'm the least of my family. And Gideon throws up everything saying, no, I'm not a mighty man of valor. But that was the identity deep inside that he had. And then you read the rest of the story. It's amazing how he grows into that place, that reality that God saw him, that he never saw in himself, because he believed all the lies and all the stuff and the shame and the guilt and the failures of his life. He had come to a whole different vision of himself, identity, a false identity. So it's just critical that we hear from God directly. It's got to be received. You can't develop it in yourself. You can't make it up for yourself. It's got to come from God, because he's the one who created you, made you in your mother's womb, knit you together, and he put it there. And it could be totally blocked out. Like they said, when there's an eclipse, the moon goes in front of the sun, and it's almost like the sun doesn't exist, but it's there. And we have the false identity, false view of ourselves blocking our true identity. And it's almost like we can't imagine that there's something good there.
Mhm. Excellent. Mike, certified internet pastor.
Well, let's see what the internet has to say about that, John. Get some of those trolls to refute that. No, it's good stuff. I think like anything, we're always trying to, and especially as you get older, I think, at least I can say for me, it's like you begin to see yourself in a more real way, and you kind of drop off just all the, I don't know what, but anyway, yeah, I agree. I think it's always a good thing when you start digging into who you really are and putting aside all the stuff you just pick up growing up, you carry with you because you don't know anything else. And your friends, sometimes if you hang around with different people, they'll just kind of, you could hang around with people that encourage you to do and be who you are, or you can hang around with people that encourage you to be somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, there's different things, but yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
It is very good.
Anyway,
Go ahead, John.
Amazing that God will tell you. And this is the amazing thing. If you ask God, he'll speak to you about it. He wants so badly for you to know and the thing is, it'll always be good. It'll be loving and gentle and beautiful. And we're afraid to ask God things because we have been accused of so many things that through our life, we think God's going to jump in and accuse us along with everybody else. He's going to also accuse us. So we're afraid to go there, but he's not the accuser. The devil's the accuser. God is not the accuser.
Yeah, very good. And we will have the description down below about Jamie Winship, his book and website. So if you want to research it some more, check into it. It's good stuff. But, if you don't want to do that, you can always come back here every Sunday.
That's right.
Subscribe.
Subscribe, tell your friends, share the video.
Yeah.
And
see, my dad, for good reason, would say I was worse than the beasts of the field. That was one of it.
I don't know if I don't know if I remember, I can't remember if I remember.
I heard it often.
Yeah. Well, it was back then, it was kind of a thing, I guess. Yeah. Comparing, I don't know, did anybody ever compare their kids to the beasts in the field?
Dad did.
Yeah.
Okay, there you have it. Yeah.
There you have it.
And so when you're young, it's hard. And so I've grown up with a very low image of myself because of that. And so it's something that I always have to go, wait a minute. No, that's my false identity. And then I have to remind myself of what God said is my true identity, and then make decisions from that freedom and that beautiful place that God says, rather than.
Do you want to share with us what? God, do you want to share with us?
Well, I was gonna ask him what his spirit animal is. I mean, maybe Dad was pushing you in that direction.
Maybe. But no, when I did it, God said that I'm someone who loves mankind. I'm a lover of mankind.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're a lover of mankind and you love the truth. Now, I haven't fully grown into that, but God says this is deep inside of you. This is where you'll find your true joy and your abundant life and your peace. And when you operate out of that identity, you'll feel so fulfilled. So there's times I don't, there's times I do the opposite, and he's right. I feel terrible or whatever. But whenever I click into that, I sense the fulfillment. And so at least it gives you something to live out of rather than just wander in shame and guilt and fear. And
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, very good. Very good story. Good way to sum it up. Give everybody some homework. There, you got your homework.
That's right.
Come back.
We're
Remember,
one of the only YouTube channels
write
that have
down
homework.
all the images. Write down all the images of yourself that hurt you. That it feels bad when you write them down, but that's how you see yourself or whatever. Write those down and then give them to God. Say, God, I know these are lies that I believed about myself. How do you see me, God? What do you see? When you see me, what do you see and how do you view me? And then write down whatever comes to you. Just even though you don't like it or it sounds too far-fetched. I remember Tim, when Tim did it, our brother Tim, he said later that night, the words came to him, I see. And he thought, what is that? He said, well, okay, wait, but he didn't get it. I see. I got it right away when he said the next day he was doing something and the term seer came up. I said, Tim, that is you. You see into things in ways that I would never see. And that's but he had to stop and ask God and then see what happens,
Yeah, that's cool. Good stuff. All right, so now we got to wait another week. Next
Man, gotta wait a week.
Got to wait a week. Next Sunday, do it all over again.
The song says the waiting is the hardest part. I can see that now.
Yeah.
But you can watch the show over and over and over and over and over. And over.
True.
Yeah, they
Share
say
it with your
don't
friends.
ask us any questions about the show until you've watched it 10 times.
Well, no. Okay. Let's rephrase that. You can ask the question 10 times because we need the metric. Yeah, metric. We need that. Put those comments in, even if you hate us, you think we're bald and old. Just put it in there.
That's why you can't see the top of my head. I'm trying to be the bald guy.
Keep working on it, John.
All right. Y'all have a great week.
Take care.
Yep.